was rushing to work and I hate being tardy. And this woman T-boned me. Do you know what it is to be T-boned? I had the right of way and the light turned green. And this woman decided to run the light and tried to make a left-hand turn onto the highway when I was starting to go through the green light. And she hit my Hyundai. She hit my Hyundai really hard. She hit my Hyundai so hard that I couldn't move. She hit my Hyundai so hard that I couldn't do anything. And so I thought it was just a regular, you know, one of those things that you wear, stupid collar on your neck. And that's all that I thought it was. But a couple of days later, I started to shake. You ever see one of those old people who shakes all the time? That's how I started to shake. I couldn't stop shaking. I even went to a chiropractor, because that's what people do who have accidents. You know, the chiropractor wouldn't touch me. They wouldn't go near me, because it wasn't normal. And I kept waiting to stop shaking, and I couldn't stop shaking. And it was like 3 weeks. I was out of work for 3 weeks. I don't miss going to work. I never miss going to work. I couldn't do anything. And I was out of church for a while. And you guys know I never miss coming to church, right? I'm here like clockwork. And if you remember before the accident, I used to walk really, really fast. And I could lift tables like a guy. I could probably like hit harder than a guy too. Can't as much anymore. Remember, I had brothers. I still do. But I ended up being diagnosed with a neurological condition. It was a really strange neurological condition. And they started giving me a bunch of meds. And I had come back, it was like a month after I'd come back from a mission trip from Cuba. And I was so happy. And I couldn't understand why all this stuff had happened. And I had a hard time understanding. All things work together for good. And finally, I started to understand that. All things work together for good for those who love the Lord. And I kept repeating that. All things work together for those who love the Lord. And it kind of seeped in. And it took a year. And I expected the Lord to heal me. Those of you who have the privilege to go out with me don't know that God hasn't healed me. I'm better at times. But I don't walk as fast as I used to. And I get tired. And I have strange, funky reactions. So, let's fast forward. I decided to go back again to Cuba, and people started to question me and said, why are you going to go on a missions trip again? I said, I'm going to go on a missions trip. And people at work started acting strange. Remember that movie Mean Girls? Yeah. It was like high school. It was just like high school. If you go to verse 47, it says, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And with him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs. The clubs, the swords were from the Roman soldiers. But the clubs, do you know what the clubs are? You know what a club is? Okay? It's a little bit above a stick. Not quite a weapon, but it's like, do you know like cavemen? Like, okay, the reason that they were filled is with anger. They were so angry with Jesus. Now, had Jesus done anything to these people? They were so full of anger. They were so full of anger against someone who had done nothing. They were ready to start beating on Jesus. And Jesus knew what was coming. But Peter, because Peter was a fighter, and he was going to fight. He was going to fight them. He's going to stop them. He was going to stop them by whatever means that he knew necessary. And he knew, because he was used to fighting. He was somebody who had, again, impetuosity. He was a hothead. He was ready to use the weapons that he had at his disposal, whether it was his fists. I'm somebody who's quick with words. I'm good with my mind. But these women at work were coming after me. And I had always been kind to them. Always had been kind to them. And they were persecuting me. And God put me in a place where I could do nothing. And this is what he said to me. Lay down your weapons and fight no longer. And it got to the extent that they would make comments about me in my face and confront me openly. And things were escalating. Do you know what escalating means? Things were getting worse and worse, where they would talk openly there. I'm talking about grown people. I'm not talking about people your age. I'm talking about adult people with children openly in your face. And I was becoming so frustrated that I would go into my classroom. I would go into the bathroom, and all I could do was cry. And the only thing that I could hear was, lay down your weapons and fight no longer. Put your sword back in its place, said Jesus. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. And so school closed, and I thought, surely my hell has ended. And I had expectations when I left on my trip to Cuba. And I thought, it's going to be okay. It's going to be good. Things are going to be fine. When I got to Cuba, I became sick. I started to become sick. I got sicker. As the trip progressed, I became sicker and sicker and sicker. And the girls were there, they can tell you. I didn't get better. I became worse. At one point, they wanted to send me back here. It was as if everything that I had fought for and everything that I had longed for and everything that I thought, truly God would come and he would heal me because I had been faithful, that he would meet my need there and it would come full circle. But that's not what happened. My health deteriorated to such a point that it was almost like I had regressed back to the point of the accident. I couldn't even feel my hands. I couldn't even feel my feet. I started having bizarre reactions while I was on that trip. And when we got back from the trip, I sat alone in my house because my parents had gone on a trip. And I cried. I cried out to God. And there, I felt as if I had fallen into a hole. And do you you know what being forsaken is? It's the moment when Jesus cried out on the cross, when he said, Father, why have you forsaken me? It's that moment of loss, because I knew I had lost something. It's that moment when you have lost a loved one. It's that moment when you know that things are never going to be the same. It's that moment where you long for something. But it isn't true, because it's a lie from the devil. The only person that was ever forsaken was Jesus at that moment. And the reason that he went through that is so you wouldn't have to be forsaken. 2 Samuel 1:27 says, how the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war have perished, because I had fallen, and the weapons of war that I had once had perished. All my intellect, all my might, all my strength, everything that I had relied on for so long was gone. And the only thing that I could rely on was God at that moment. And in my forsakenness, and in my lack, and my understanding that it didn't matter anymore, that he didn't heal me, that he didn't do the things that I was longing for him to do. Lay down your weapons and fight no longer. How many of you have been fighting a fight? You've been fighting for so long. You've been fighting a fight on your own strength. You've been fighting a fight that you don't even know why you're fighting. Psalms 46:9 says, he makes wars to cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and he shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. God doesn't need you to fight the fight. You've been trying to fight fights under your understanding, your comprehension. You're trying to do things under your own strength. You're trying to do things on your own. He doesn't need you to do that. What he told Peter was, put your sword back in its place. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Jesus doesn't need you to fight that fight. He doesn't need you to meet anger with anger. He doesn't need you. He wants you to sit there and take it. He wants you to sit there and take it. Every last smack, every last time they spat on him, every last humbling moment that he went through, he wants you to sit there and take it. Who are we to be prideful? Who are we to stand up in rebellion and say, I'm better? We're not better. We're not better than he. 2 Thessalonians 1:6 says, God is going to do what is right. He will give trouble to those who trouble you. God is going to do what is right, and he will give trouble to those who trouble you. But it's not going to be the way that you think that it's going to be. In your mind, you may think, God's going to punish my enemies, but that's not what the Word of God is commanding you to do. He's commanding you to love your enemies. Romans 2:9 says, he will give trouble and suffering to everyone who does evil. And Finally, Isaiah 54:17a says, no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn. You shall condemn. It doesn't matter what they're saying against you. It doesn't matter that they're talking about you like a dog at school. It doesn't matter that the mean girls at school are saying whatever they're saying. Let them talk their talk. Let them. It doesn't matter that it's your family member. Let go of it. Lay down your weapons and fight no longer. It's not your fight. You're not a Spartan. God hasn't called you to fight. Lay down your weapons tonight. For God calls you to a most excellent fight. He's going to fight that fight for you tonight. He wants to fight a fight that will leave you without scars, that will leave you where there will be no blood. He wants to call you to a fight where you will not grow tired, because you've been fighting under your own strength for so long. You've been fighting for so long, and you don't understand it. And you're sitting there proud and haughty and thinking, I can do this. I can do this. And you don't understand that if you continue that if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. God gave me this message, and He gave it specifically for me. But I know that He's talking to some of you tonight. I know that He's talking to some of you tonight. And I know there's a bunch of you out there who've still been fighting that fight.